how to get the app up and running on your tutorial of how to get the app up and running on your machine. And so we're going to start on in our base repository, and we're going to download this folder. And while it's downloading, you can just clone this repository if you have a GitHub account. That works as well. And the only folder we'll really be looking at is this deliverable for MVP. This is what holds our application code. And so it is downloaded. And I'm going to put this, you can put this anywhere. You can put it in the directory of your choice. Mine is going to be on my L drive, and it can just go straight in here. So we'll take the folder, and we're just going to copy it to our L drive. And now that we have our repository downloaded, what we need to do is we have to download Node.js to run it. Node.js is just what we're using, and we can use this recommended for most users version. And when that downloads, it just takes a little bit. We're going to click on this, and we're going to run the file. And it's going to prompt us, do we want to run this file? Hit run. And it'll just compute the space requirements quickly. And then you can choose where you want to install it, and all the different options. So you're going to accept the license agreement, and you can choose which folder to install Node.js to. Now, I don't have room on that drive, so I'm going to create my own Node folder. This can be called whatever you want. And you can hit next, and it'll tell you what features do you want to install. And so we're just going to leave everything at its default. It's going to add it to your path, which means you can run it. It's going to use install npm package manager. It just lets you do that. And then there's another checkbox here, automatically install the necessary tools. We don't need this for this project, but if you're going to be doing other development, you may want to look into it. And we can just hit install. And so it's just going to prompt you, do you want to allow the following program to install? We're going to hit yes, we trust this, and it's just going to install quickly. And this takes a little while, but I'll be back with you when it's all right. So Node.js has been successfully installed. We're going to hit finish, and we are going to press the Windows key, and we're going to type cmd, and we are going to open up our command line. Now, a way to make sure that Node is installed, we're going to type node-v. And if you type that, you'll see 12.16.1, and that is the version that we installed here. Now, our next step is actually in our deliverable folder. So in this folder, wherever you downloaded the repository to, okay, so our next step is going to be running our app. So we previously installed a repository, and we are going to look at this deliverable for MVP folder. Now, if you right-click in this folder, you might notice open with code or open in Visual Studio. This really depends on what you have installed and what you have available to you. I'll leave some links down below on where you can install code, because I find this just super useful for lightweight installation. But what we can actually do is, with our command line, we are going to go to this deliverable for folder. Now, since we are on a different drive, it's a little different. If you're on a different drive, you're going to go, we're going to go to the L drive just by typing L:. If that's the D drive, it would be D: for you. And we're going to hit enter. We are now in this L folder. Now, what you can do is you can copy this folder path just by clicking up top, and we're going to copy this. And we're going to type CD, which stands for change directory, and we are going to paste this using right click. So we're going to paste what we copied using right click, and we'll hit enter. And we are now in this deliverable for NVP folder. Now we've installed Node. We have our command line in the folder for the repository that we downloaded, and we're now going to type npm install. This is going to install all of our dependencies, and it's just going to make sure that we have all the files necessary to run the program. This might take a while depending on your connection, depending on your computer. So we'll be back once this installation is done. Okie dokie. So our npm install has succeeded. It might tell you that there are some low severity vulnerabilities. You can type npm audit if you want, but we're going to leave those as is. There might be a different number there. There might be nothing there. But we have done our npm install. We have all of our dependencies now. You might notice that the command line looks different. I just made the text a little bit bigger so it's easier on your eyes. And so we've done our installation, and we are going to type npm start. And this is going to start our application. And you're going to notice that this brings up, there we go. This brings up a window in your browser. Okay, so now we have our web interface set up. So we'll notice that it has a Metro bundler, and you won't have these 3 different devices. These are just different devices that I used for testing. Now on this left-hand panel, you'll notice a run on Android device emulator, run on iOS simulator, run in web browser, which something to note, this is in beta, so it might not be there. Send link with email, which just lets you send it to your phone, and publish or republish, and then the QR code. The QR code is to scan when using the app, and I'll cover that in just a little bit. So the first thing that I'm going to cover is running your device, running it in the web browser. This is not a web app by any means, and it is not optimized for web, but it's just a quick, easy way, if it's there, to see what your device is looking like and what a style might do. So we are going to click Run in Web Browser, and we are going to make sure that this connection is on local, otherwise the connection might not work. So we're going to click Run in Web Browser, and it's going to open up, and what we see is we see our tip screen. You'll notice in just a second that this is not what shows up on Android emulator, and it is not what shows up on the iOS emulator. It's just a quirk of the web development and the space it thinks it has. Same thing with this bottom bar. But you can see that you can click, you'll get your feedback, you'll get your sound, you can hit call, and you'll get your response. You'll also notice that the scrolling function is a little odd, and it doesn't translate as well over in the web as it does to phone. So the next thing that we're going to look at is running it on an Android device / emulator. So when we're doing this, it is running on a phone. This is just the best way to get what it looks like for real on an Android device. So what we are going to use is an Android emulator. You can plug in your phone, and I can send a link to this. It's a little more involved, but you have to enable USB debugging and a couple other things to make it work, but it's a bit much to cover, and an easier way to do that is to use an emulator. And so the emulator we are going to use is through Android Studio. So I'll send a link to Android Studio, but you can just Google it, Android Studio, and you can hit download Android Studio, and you can download it, and you can install it wherever you want, and just follow the installation instructions, and you will see, once it's successfully downloaded, you'll see this screen. It loads up a test project, but we are going to ignore that because we are looking for the emulators. So in this, in Android Studio, if you go Tools, Android Virtual Device Manager, or AVD Manager, we're going to click on that, and we are going to see a screen called Your Virtual Devices. I already have some devices installed. You may not. They may come pre-installed. It really depends. But I will run through how to create a virtual device and what the steps are and what are some things to consider. So the first thing is you have to choose a device. So this is what defines the size, the resolution, and the density. These are some things that you might want to look at. So 1080 by 1920, 1440 by 2880, 1440 by 2560. There are a lot of different resolutions. So what we're going to use is the pixel, the 1080 by 1920. So you then select a system image. This is the API level of the Android system, or it's pretty much what your phone is going to be running, the operating system. And so you can download a system image, and we are going to download Q, and we already have Q installed. You can use a recommended. I'll go through this download process. You can click download, you can accept the agreement, and then it'll prepare to download. I'm going to cancel out of this and select just what I already have installed. And then you can choose the virtual device name, and we can call this Fire Safety Simulator. And you can see that this is a 5-inch screen. It's 1080 by 1920, and it is 420 dpi. You can see the Android version we're using, and you can set the startup orientation. We're going to leave it as portrait. And you can look through some advanced settings, but these are the main features. And we're going to hit finish, and it is going to create this emulator for us. And we can go ahead and run it. And we are going to launch it, and up pops our emulator. So this is what it's going to look like the first time you open it. If you used a different emulator, it's going to look different. And we can click this power button, and this is going to power it on. If you've used an emulator before, it stays powered on. But the first time, you will have to click this power button or Control P to turn it on. And it takes a couple minutes to load the emulator for the first time, but it functions identical to an Android phone. And I'll come back once this is finished setting up. Okay, so our Android device has started up. You can pull down on the top and you'll see that it is like the notification system. You can pull up and you'll see all the apps that are installed, and it just works as a normal Android app. Now, if we go back to that browser that we had open before, this local host at 19,002, or whichever port that it opened up for you, we can run it on Android device /emulator. And if we click, we'll notice in the bottom right corner, it is attempting to open a simulator. And this is just it trying to connect, and it is connecting now. We'll see that it is installing Expo on the device. Expo is what we are using to bundle our code and run this app. And I'll go over more on Expo in just a little bit. But it is going to install it, and then it is going to open our app on the device. And then you can see what it looks like. And I'll go through another device as well that's already set up and just show you how to use the emulator and how to set it up. Okay, so it has downloaded Expo. It took a little longer than it thought, but it is opening on our Android device. And so the first thing that it does is it bundles our application, and then it is downloading that application. And then we'll see that it launches like this. So we'll see the what is our number, and if you compare it to what we had before up here, you'll notice that it's not quite the same, but it is very similar. Just this upper tip here is what really the big difference, and then the bottom navigation bar. So you can click on this, you'll still get sound feedback, and you'll be able to call, you'll be able to see the images, and you'll be able to see the script, and you can drag or scroll. Dragging is smoother, scroll is a little unreliable, but you can go through the scroll view, and you'll be able to see it a bit nicer, and you'll see how things are lined up. So this is one screen, the 1080 by 1920, and I'm going to close this emulator, and we're going to go back to this virtual device, and I'm going to pick this Pixel 3 XL, and I'm going to launch this application. And so it'll launch the Android emulator. You'll notice that it launches directly to where I had it before, and Expo is already installed. And so you can hit run on Android device, and it'll attempt to open it up. And generally the second time around, or third, or however many times you've done it now, it gets faster, and it's just a little quicker to open it up. It doesn't have to download anything. And so we'll see that it opens it up, and it will launch on this new simulator that we opened up, and it'll just download it, and here we are. And it looks a little bit different, but generally, again, it's the same. We have a bit more space up here, and it's a bit closer to the top, but we'll see that the scroll still works the same, and in general, you get a better idea for how the application will look. And so our next option is an iOS simulator. I can leave a link to a tutorial that I think might help. I cannot do this myself because you require a Mac for this, and I don't have that available to me. But if you, the next two options that I'll go through will help you run it on both Android and iOS, if possible. So this QR code that we mentioned at the start, we haven't gotten to yet, but now we can. So when we type npm start and it brings up this, what we are running is an Expo application. And Expo bundles your code so that it runs on both Android and iOS. And so we are going to use what's called the Expo app. And we can look at it on Expo on Google Play and App Store. I'll put the links down below. And what you can do is you can install this, and this is what it's going to look like on Android. You'll be able to see a profile, explore, projects, and what we are going to be looking at is, I can show you on the virtual device actually. What we are going to be looking at is the projects tab. And so you'll see project URLs, you'll see recently in development, recently opened. And normally what will be up here is a scan QR code option on Android. And what that allows you to do is to scan this QR code and run the app yourself. Something to note is the connection mode should be on tunnel for this instead of local as we used for our web browser. And this will work for Android. And for Apple, here's the app. The link will be in the description as well. But something to note is when you are opening a project, instead of having a tool to scan the QR code right within the app, you can scan it directly with your camera app, and a notification will pop up, open in Expo, and you can click that and it will launch your app. I will include some screenshots and some tutorials as well, just in case you want to try those out. And it's a way that you can see what it looks like on your device and iOS if you have an iOS phone but you don't have a Mac to run that iOS simulator. And so this is how you run our application, and we will have a published section that you can use so that you can use it without having to do any of this installation process if that is what you require. Thank you.